it is such a genuine relationship that so you feel very strongly within your heart that my master has given me so much, so much knowledge, so much understanding. He has given practically everything to me. So now you also become a little obligated. You become a little sincere, then you become obligated. So that way, there is it's a devotion, the love and affection, the sincere desire to render some service becomes manifest within the heart of this individual candidate. But so long as I am not manifesting properly, that means I haven't developed proper sense of understanding in Krishna consciousness. So when the moment comes, when the day begins, when I really begin to understand the desire of the spiritual master and what he wanted me to do, and what I am supposed to do, when that begins to strike very strongly within your heart, then that at the beginning stage of your commitment to very serious service to satisfy him. So that is actually the seed of enthusiasm. So when such things happen, then no matter where one is, either in the forest or in any condition of existence, then he will become always feeling very, very, always thinking about how to satisfy my master, how I can render some service, even in the most difficult situations. So that way the seed of enthusiasm will be there and it will grow very nicely. But then when I do not understand the instruction of the spiritual master and what I am supposed to do, then you will be simply bewildered. Then it may not last very long. That is why so many devotees come and so many devotees go. Sometimes making some type of artificial adjustment, saying that all the leaders are not supporting me, or the leaders are not bona fide, all kinds of some type of excuses. These are all false excuses. The very fact is that they don't have the understanding of the order of the spiritual master, and somehow in their heart has not been, somehow ready to take it. So that is why they leave the movement under some false pretext. So that means somehow the understanding is not there. They haven't understood properly. So that is why they cannot be enthusiastic. So when they understand properly, then they will not leave, and also they will develop this great understanding, and then they will be enthusiastic. It's not the number that counts, but I think that is the quality, as I discussed. The number, if you like it, you can collect so many numbers. It's not the number that we want, but the quality that I think that is most important. One time Prabhupada wrote me a letter saying that if I can convince one man, he said that is sufficient. One person, if I can make one person a devotee, a real devotee, that is sufficient. That will be able to save millions. So we are not so much anxious about collecting numbers. It is sometimes a great burden, unless to train someone who will never come to the proper standard. It's a great. You have to grind your energy day and night, but still you don't come into the proper standard of Krishna consciousness. And then it's, of course, our duty is to train everyone, but at the same time, but then if you have a great soul coming by your preaching, then it's a lot easier. So in other words, the quality is most important than the quantity. So the central point is that we have to develop that quality within ourselves. So all of us, say in the movement, let's say 10 years, 15 years, in the movement, we cannot claim that I have developed all the good qualities. Every moment we have to try hard in such a way that we maintain a good standard. Krishna consciousness. And also make sure that anybody around you, try to develop good consciousness, good spirit of service attitude. So even if it is 2 people or 3 people, if you form a nucleus like that, then whatever you build around you will be of that quality. But then among so many difficult situations, there is one person, one good person, then sometimes it makes so much difficult for him. So in other words, we have to develop this quality, the highest quality in Krishna consciousness. That means every one of us, the ladies, the children, the brahmacharis, and everyone, we have to maintain a good ashram system. Nice, understanding each other, how to behave among ourselves, and how to maintain a good Krishna conscious culture. That's like even in the form of singing, dancing. If we are really enthusiasm, then you give your life. Why sing in a very lazy way? Sing at the top of your voice. Glorify the Lord. Sometimes we see some devotees are very enthusiastic in the kirtan, but some are not so enthusiastic. They are on the sideline. But why one has to be on the sideline? Should be glorifying the Lord at the top of your voice, because that is how you become enthusiastic, and then do things in such a way you get enthusiasm. Why try to be behind? Just go forward. And any type of service, like if someone to do cooking, you do cooking in such a way that you can cook the best item that you can offer to the Lord. And similarly, if you are making nice garland, make it in such a way that the most beautiful garland that you could ever make, or nobody can do it like you're doing. So similarly, any type of service, whether it's small or large, doesn't matter. Even sweeping the floor, you do it with great enthusiasm. But then if you are feeling that, well, I am compelled to do it because I have been ordered by the temple president or the temple commander, I am simply ordered, and you are simply like a feeling something out of compulsion or out of some type of obligation, then you feel that you're doing like it, then you don't be very lasting. But you have to do it with enthusiasm. Yes, I am doing it for Krishna, I am doing for the Lord, so let me do it nicely. So that type of a spontaneous little duty, it's called the dutiful, spontaneous attitude, I think will be extremely desirable for everything, in all types of our activities, in all our frontiers of our preaching activity. That way, things can go on very, very nicely, and also with great enthusiasm. So that is our duty, and sometimes also, like when somebody's mistakes are pointed out, actually we should be able to appreciate that, yes, I am now lagging behind. So now some of my God brothers are so concerned about my well-being, so they tell you, yes, either such and such, you're not coming in time for the Mangalarati, you're not, taking in time for taking Mahaprasad, so why are you doing like that? And you're not going out Sankirtan, what happened with you? Is something wrong? Sometimes it happens like that. But then, this individual, when such difficulties are pointed out, you should be able to appreciate, yes, because in the world of Vaishnava culture, when somebody, points out certain mistakes, then he could appreciate. You could appreciate, yes. But in the world of karmis, they say, oh, he's finding fault with me. I'm not coming, this Mangalarati because I was late last night, didn't this and that. But now he's finding fault with me. He tries to, give some difficulty. It's not like that. But rather, we should appreciate that he has come to help me because I am lagging behind my devotional service. So like that type of understanding should be developed among the devotees. And that way, we can have a very harmonious and a very enthusiastic group of devotees together. So that way, it's very nice. It's very nice. And you can see, when traveling in temples in different paths, sometimes we also find that some temples are really enthusiastic. And the kirtan, even the arati, and even it doesn't matter the number, right? Even 2 people, 3 people, it could be very enthusiastic. And you can also feel it, you can see it. And so it's very nice. It's very nice. But then sometimes some temples are a little different situation where people are not so enthusiastic. And so I think it's our duty to make them enthusiastic. Because after all, we have come to this movement, for one goal, to understand the ultimate goal of life. We've given up everything. So the thing is, you already know the ultimate goal of life. So in order to attain that goal, we have somehow to proceed forward very strongly in spite of great difficulties. So that should be actually Krishna conscious. When you advance in Krishna consciousness, every moment will be a joy of experience, an experience of joy. Every moment, no matter where you are. It may be difficult, even you may be criticized by this, that and that. But if you are really in Krishna consciousness, you will be really joyful. Even somebody may chastise me, hit me, try to shoot with some gun, but you should be able to smile. That is actually a test. But then now the thing is that sometimes, like in our stage, neophyte stage, then when you are chastised by someone, then you get angry. It's very easily, because you are very good in becoming angry. Everyone, even a child, becomes so easily angry. Let's say, so expert. But actually in Krishna consciousness, it's just the opposite. When somebody, even chastises me, I should be able to, at least outwardly you may not be smiling, but inwardly we should be able to understand it. And why you should be sad, because after all you know the ultimate goal of life, and so you should be able to take things in the spirit of Krishna consciousness. So every moment should be an experience of joy in Krishna consciousness, because you know the ultimate goal of life. So that way you should be enthusiastic. You should be enthusiastic. So the primary force is that, like when such a fire of enthusiasm goes within your heart, then you are feeling such a state of existence that you are full of energy, unlimited energy, wanting to do so many things, expand the movement and doing so much nice service for Krishna, for Prabhupada, and so that way, you'll be always in this state of existence. It happens. Just like Prabhupada, when he came even in such an old age, physically, but out of a great enthusiasm to fulfill the order of his master, and a great enthusiasm, and a great attachment to the Lord, and Prabhupada did it. Such fire of enthusiasm comes from a strong commitment, having strong understanding to be loyal to the order of the spiritual master. So that is required. I think this is the key to enthusiasm. Otherwise, we are all free living beings. All individual free will we have. So everyone is free to do that what he wants. But then when you apply that free will to the service of serving the order of the spiritual master, the Lord, then the free will becomes actually properly utilized. So that way the enthusiasm continues and lingers. Just like the relationship between the gopis and Krishna. And out of great enthusiasm to serve the Lord, they have given everything. They don't even think anything else, except how to satisfy the Lord, how to please the Lord. So our attitude should be unconditional and unmotivated. It should be almost like spontaneous. So like when something is given, some duty is given to me, and then I like to think about it, whether I like to do this service or not. That means I am putting a condition, as if the service is favorable to my whatever demands of my senses or dictates of my mind. Then if it is satisfying to me, then I will do it. Or if it is not, then I will not do it. So this conditional, to put a condition is not very good in the devotional service. So in other words, when any devotee or any devotee is requested to do certain service by the leader or by the spiritual master, he should say, yes, I will do it. If you want me to wash the kitchen or clean the kitchen or do this and do that, and I should be, in principle, I should be a yes man. Not ordinary yes, 100%. I should not have any doubt. Even I should not even indicate a little. Like sometimes, if you don't respond so spontaneously, then definitely the other person also knows. What your feeling are. You are a little resentful. You are not saying yes immediately, so that means you are enthusiastic. But if I am really a disciple, a true disciple in the true sense of the term, then I should be, even before the order is finished, even the sentence is finished, I should already be giving, yes, I'll do it. I already know what is going to be the complete sentence. It's not even necessary. And sometimes it's often said even by the eye, by the movement of the eye, you should be able to respond. I mean, if I really know my spiritual master, thus by the movement of his eye, I should know what he wants me to do. Actually, it's like that. Let's see, by the look, sometimes the looks and the glances are not ordinary glances when the spiritual master looks around the devotees. There is a purpose. So we should be able to respond to that. Whether the spiritual master needs water or sometimes we see when in dealing with Prabhupada. So we should be able to at least respond to the feeling of the master very nicely. That way, that's a sign of enthusiasm. That's a sign of great attachment. And such things are required actually to keep us going very strongly in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise you feel very morose and very sad and sometimes sad looking. And but there's no room for being sadness in Krishna consciousness. Of course, momentarily sometimes I may have disagreement with some argument. It's quite natural. But even then, you should be able to smile. You should be able to, take it a very positive way in the spirit of Krishna consciousness. So these are some very, secrets of success in Krishna consciousness, advancing in Krishna consciousness. Great attachment to the order of the spiritual master. Be able to know his intention, what he wants me to do. Yeah. So this material universe is one-fourth of the whole, and three-fourths is the spiritual world. So since we have this material body, so since from the description of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it looks quite natural that we have to first cross the material layers, and then once you cross the material layer, then you'll be able to go to the spiritual, begin the three-quarter existence of the spiritual kingdom. And this is in the cosmology described about both the material as well as the spiritual. Since we are in this spiritual, we have a spiritual existence, the material body in this material world. So we have to somehow surpass this material covering. I think that is described here. Of course, we may not be able to see exactly how, because we don't have the direct experience, the 7 layers. and passing through all these different stages. But from the description of the Bhagavatam given, it looks that we have to go like that too. When you go back to Godhead, you have to fly in one of these airplanes by the mercy of the Lord, and be able to see all the different planetary systems. And actually we want to know how all this shining, these luminaries in the sky. Sometimes we have a desire to know what these are. And looks from the description of this Bhagavatam that we have to surpass all these things, going to the spiritual world. Actually we do not know, since we have no direct experience. It's only from the description of the Bhagavatam that we can have some idea. Yeah.
As you were from Manipur, Baba mentioned one time that he wanted very much Manipur should become all Vaishnavas, because I think previously or still now there used to be practically all Vaishnava. And I was just wondering a little bit about the history of Manipur. Is there any famous Vaishnavas that come from here? Kings or anything?
Manipur is a small land. It is the northeastern part of India, and there has been many histories about Manipur. Also, Prabhupada told me that this is the only area which is left from the Vedic culture, which is still continuing the traditional Vaishnava culture. Generally, the geography is that it's all surrounded by mountains. It's near Burma, and this is surrounded by 9 rows of circles of exactly nine mountains, one after another. And there are many songs of Manipur, what a description of the geography, and because of its, I think. This geography as well as the long history. True that there has been some Vaishnava culture, but of course now in Kali Yuga things have also been changed a lot. But at least the Vaishnava spirit is still there. Although in recent times there has been so much trouble because of so many other activities by the influence of Kali. But nonetheless, the people are almost by 99.9%, almost like Vaishnavas. And very recently the Christianity came. And otherwise, when I was in school, there was it's about 25 years ago. And at the time, to my knowledge, there was only one Christian family in the whole Manipur. One. And everyone was a Vaishnava, at least family-wise. And this one Christian family was, sometimes he was joked by others, how he became. But otherwise, it was a very strong Vaishnava culture. See, we didn't have any like radio program. There was a radio, but radio was all about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. From Chaitanya Charitamrita, reading, it is in the radio, and from Mahabharata, and Chaitanya Lila, Krishna Lila, and whatever activity in Manipur is all based on the pastimes of Krishna. That's a childhood pastimes, then the cowherd boys, everything is based on the culture of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna and Ramayana. So it was like that. Even though there was the program was going on till very recently, just about 4 or 5 years ago. Even the radio, there's a program like that. But then I saw some change in the last almost 2-3 years. That when I became a devotee here and went back, and I still heard that the Ramayana. and also the Chaitanya Charitamrita reading in the radio. Then I saw stopping and stopped. And I asked what happened. And then said there was from the Christian groups and other groups became some complaint, and now things are changing. Of course, in the morning, like the whole morning program is all devotional songs. It's still going on, and except some parts. And so generally, even now the culture is all based on this devotional spirit, especially the Ras Lila and this Ras Lila and other pastimes of Krishna, quite prominent. But now, and also this Govinda temple was started by the king of Manipur. Manipur was an independent country before the British came. So it only became part of India after independence, 1947. So it was like Nepal. It was an independent country in the eastern part. So it has its own tradition, it has its own culture, but the culture is based strictly on this devotion. So here I met Prabhupada first time in Los Angeles, and the first day, and then he told me that Manipur, he told me the story about Arjuna. See, Arjuna came to Manipur during the Aswamedha Yajna. This is also in Mahabharata. And also there is some descriptions in the 9th canto, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, you find about Manipur, and the Srimad Bhagavatam 9th canto. Prabhupada mentions about, in his commentary about Manipur also. Now when Arjuna came, during the Aswamedha Yajna, at the time the king of Manipur was quite old, and he didn't have a son, there was no prince. But he only had this daughter, the daughter was Chitrangada. So when Arjuna came, so the king of Manipur surrendered to Arjuna, but he was already old and he could not fight with Arjuna. Arjuna is so powerful. So, but his daughter was not very pleased with that, Chitrangada. So Chitrangada thought that she should fight with Arjuna. And of course, so then Arjuna was very impressed with Chitrangada's bravery, her great enthusiasm fighting with him. So Arjuna decided to marry her. So that's how Arjuna got married to Chitrangada. So Prabhupada told me this story that during this marriage that they have a son. That son is called Babrubahan. So Arjuna had 3 wives, and one of the wives is this Chitrangada, the Subhadra, and so this son was born called Prabhuvahan. So then when Arjuna came next time for Aswamedha Yajna, and he was challenging his own son in Manipur. Prabhuvahan, he was already becoming a king there in Manipur when he came. So there was a great fight between the father and the son. And somehow Arjuna was defeated by his son in Manipur, Prabhuvahan. In fact, Prabhuvahan killed him. So Krishna had to have his special mercy to Arjuna to bring back to life. And so that is in the Mahabharata, chapter in Mahabharata about a fight between Arjuna and his son in Manipur. So like that, Manipur became very well known because of this. It is known as the land of Prabhuvahan. In fact, Prabhupada told me that as soon as I met him, he said, you are all descendants from Prabhuvahan. So you have to be very fighting, fighting spirit. So that way it's continuing. And also the land itself is actually, though people are quite small, but they are known as Kshatriyas. They have a strong martial art technique, which is very good. In fact, martial arts is very strong, like sword fighting, and then there are several arts the martial art, which is very regarded as very fine form of fighting among among various. The challenge goes on still now. There are different areas that there is a season during the season. I think it is in the summer season, now from about June, July, August. During the rainy season, there is a challenge. Also during the winter season, there are different periods. This is another period where there will be challenges from different segments of the people. This is about some type of a martial art, and so this goes on, so people are very fond of this type of art there. And like in a horse polo, I think you might be hearing about polo, this horse, this hockey. It started in history, it started in Manipur. The original history of how this horse polo started is from Manipur. Is a Kshatriya game. It's a Vaishnava game, but practiced by the Kshatriyas. It's regarded a very noble game. The horses. So it is part of the culture. It goes on till now, and people love horse riding. But these are all mountains. It's all surrounded by mountains, but most of the people live in a small valley, and the landscape is quite beautiful. It's all like miles and miles of lotus flowers. So this is the very season now. In the month of July, August, during the monsoon, then what happens is all the lotus comes up in the field, and it surrounds near the Puri hills. So there will be lakes, and you can find the rows of lotus flowers. It's very beautiful during this, especially at this time in the month of August. So generally, Janmashtami falls during this month season, and so a lot of boys and girls, they go to the lake to pick lotus, and also they have a special like game in the lake. This is a different platform. Boys and girls, they take a big boat, and then they have a special, I think, sense gratificatory pastimes among boys and girls. And but among these are done among the lotus flowers to pick tea. The lotus has a beautiful the seed. When the whole of the lotus, when it is after getting this lotus mature, and then and this is very tasty. In this whole there are at least about some 40 or 50 seeds. So you pick them, and then you just open it, and it is like a very nice nut inside. It's very tasty. So boys and girls, or especially during this time, they go to take this. It's a delicacy. It's everywhere. It's very tasty. So that continues to September, October. The season changes, so in such a nice way that you can really see. And at the same time, since there's no factories, it's very clean, very clear. The sky, when you look at it from Manipur, you see the sky. That's why I was looking at this very often. I think you should have some stars here. This is all a cloud. It's very clean. It's very nice, and we have the landscape. You see the hillsides all surrounded by pineapples. As you can see, they're all pineapples. I think are the best in the world. Very sweet, very sweet. There are different kinds, but the one which is very good is also big. Is as big as the Hawaiian pineapple. It's very big and very sweet. Very sweet. It's like almost dissolves in your mouth. And it's pineapples, I think, are the best fruits we have. And then oranges. The oranges, we have this what we call it tangerines. They are oranges and the pineapples and the mangoes. But the climate it's not like the rest of India. It is very much like a little bit like California. it's not hot at all in the summertime, but of course it rains quite a lot. But in the winter season, it's quite cold. There's a little frost. Not so much snow, but a little frost. But as soon as the sun comes up, it's very pleasant. And so that there was this Vishnu worship going on before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's. Before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Vishnu worship was still going on in Manipur. There are Vishnu temples, very old Vishnu temples, historic Vishnu temples. And then after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially the disciples of Narottam Das Thakur, they came to Manipur. And at the time, the king of Manipur was very much attracted to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So he became a disciple. So since it was ruled by the king, so everyone became a Vaishnava. So you find in Manipur traditionally also now everyone wears tilak. And the ladies, and also tilak is regarded as an ornament. And like the ladies do not go to the market without tilak, because she will be like outcast if she doesn't put tilak on her forehead. And so like that because of the so our line is exactly in the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's line, the families and the system in Manipur, Vaishnava culture. So that is why like in Vrindavan, also in Navadip, so you find regularly there will be many Manipuris, they regularly go to our temples. And also at the time by the king of Manipur, there is you see there are some nice temples in Navadip, it's built by the king of Manipur. If you cross the Ganges, and you find some temples built by the Manipur, and they are all still maintained by the people from Manipur. Also like in Vrindavan, like Kesighat, you find some temples built by the king. Also in like Radhakunda, you go to Radhakunda, you'll find almost 50% of the people are Manipuris, because they will speak. And even in Vrindavan, you see most of the stores, all the Brajavasi, they can speak Manipuri, because there's so Manipuri. When I go to the shops, they only speak Manipuri. You'll find most of them can speak. All the Brajavasi in the shops in Vrindavan, you go to Loi Bazaar, you'll find most of them can speak Manipuri. So Prabhupada told me many things about Manipur, and I first day when I met him in Los Angeles. And so he was wanting to go to Manipur in 1977. But then Prabhupada won't go without me. So I was struggling for my visa. May God to go, but I could not go to India. So Prabhupada said, no, whenever you come, we'll go. But then 1977 also we were planning to go, but then Prabhupada became very ill. So it didn't happen. But the culture is going on. In recent times we have great difficulties because of the influence of so many other factors. But then coming ISKCON in Manipur, it became very much inspired to the Vaishnavas. So they feel that now somehow by Prabhupada's mercy, the traditional culture of Vaishnavism will continue to exist in Manipur. So I'd say, although at the beginning I had some difficulty, but now in spite of so many difficulties, but we are unaffected. We have been gladly admired by every circle, students and the leaders. And so when I started school, of course, like in Manipur, the type of school that I am doing it's practically the same as like Gurukul, because of the land itself. Because everyone is practically born in Vaishnava traditional family, so the children come with tilaks, except that I don't have their head shaved, and I have uniform because of the certain principle that I try to maintain. Because of the next to it, there is a strong Christian missionary school called Little Flower. So, and our ashram is just nearby, and so because of that, I am having some special type of a school program, and it's because of the school program, the leaders of the society, they are all sending their children, and they are all coming to us and helping in so many different ways. So it's developing in the last few years very strongly. And in fact, Prabhupada told me that I wanted to make a line of Vaishnava. So the first complete Krishna conscious state in our movement. So he had a special desire, and so I'm just feeling that maybe by the mercy of Prabhupada, by the mercy of all the Vaishnavas, I think we can do some nice service. But generally, people are quite simple. They are very simple and very not so much exploited by some external agents, but still the influence is coming. So now ISKCON has to do something, a nice program, so that everyone can be under control. And so someday you can come and visit us. Now there is also a restriction. You cannot go to Manipur so easily. Only three devotees who came was Baba Bhuti, and then called Bhagavatamrita. He's from South America, and there was a Drugam, he was from Italy. And so the three continents visited. Like the one American, that's Baba Bhuti. And from South America there was this Bhagavatamrita. He was from South America, isn't it? And the Durgam is from Italy. Three of them came from a special arrangement. It was for about 2-3 days for a program. But other than that, no one has come up to that. And I tried hard to get a few of our devotees, but I couldn't get permission. But I'm sure that after a little while, I think it will become a lot easier because of the school and the programs that we are doing. Yeah. Manipur was a separate country, yeah. Tripura was also a separate country. Nepal, Tripura, Manipur, Bhutan, Assam. Assam was a king. There was this king, this Ahom kings. Those are like a small little kingdoms there. And there was intermarriage, between these different kings. Like Manipur has a strong tie with Nepal. Still now they have there are many Nepalis in Manipur, and also they are similar type of people also. And a king there was intermarriage, and also Tripura. Tripura was called, it was not called Tripura, it was called Takhel. The original name before British is called Takhel, Takhel. That was the name of Tripura. In fact, there's a nice story about how this Ras Lila, the Ras dance, Manipuri dance, became part of this culture in Manipur. Actually it's done by the king. The whole uniform and the whole style of dancing is revealed by to the vision of the king. Where the king became, yeah. 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 Ah, I see. Mm-hmm. Actually, the king is called Bhaigachandra Maharaj. Bhaigachandra Maharaj, when he was ruling, he was a great devotee of Krishna. So what happened is that the Bhaigachandra Maharaj is a brother. When he was the brother and they had a misunderstanding. So Bhaigachandra Maharaj was driven out of of Manipur at the time. So, but he took shelter in Tripura, in the king of Tripura. He went there, and he spent some time. But then when his brother knew that he was in this Tripura, so he wrote a letter to the king of Tripura to kill him. It's a Bhaigachandra, because he's unwanted and he's trying to create trouble, so kill him. Because this is between the two kings. But then the king of Tripura also was not very bad at the time. He wasn't very much willing to do that. But at the same time, he wanted to test whether this Bhaigachandra, who will be the rightful inheritance, to rule Manipur. So he was thinking a little bit like that, and so he wanted to give a test to Bhaigachandra. The test was that if he is really a bona fide king to rule Manipur, then if I give him some trouble, then he will be saved by the Lord. But if he's not bona fide, then he'll be finished. So the test was that he was supposed to tackle a wild elephant, very ferocious and wild elephant. So this Bhaigachandra Maharaj will be allowed to fight with this elephant. And so, the wild elephant, with the tusk this long. And so he was given this facility, yes, and say, I have a test for you. So now if you're going to be a bona fide king of Manipur, then you should be able to pass this. But if you're not, then you're not bona fide. So actually it was arranged. This is a real historical event. It happened about 300 years ago. So it was arranged, a date was fixed that the Bhaigachandra Maharaj will be thrown in this wild elephant. And so that's to test whether he will be king or not in Manipur. And when the day came, and so that night when the